Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Sunday Night Live with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk. Moving in my chair. It's March the flipping 3rd already. Can you believe it? That's insane. It's ridiculous. Dave is asking if audio is working. It's working at this end. So if you're not hearing anything, it must be at your end and must be on your computer, because it's absolutely working here. Excuse me. I can see that all my monitors are peaking. All my meters are peaking, I should say. The mic is peaking, and the meter for Studio One was definitely peaking during the intro, so I know it is working. So it must be at your end, I'm afraid, my friend. You may have to check your audio settings, or you may have to start again. Maybe just refresh or something like that. But yeah, everything should be fine. I've not changed anything. So sound should be lovely and beautiful. So let's go and see who is here. We have Billy, we have Ron, we have Tony, we have Dementia, and I know who that is because he keeps changing his channel name very regularly. That's Dave, and that's another funny channel name. And we've got Dwayne here, who is watching the Oscars and watching me as well, which is awesome. That's a very special talent you got there, Dwayne, for sure. Yes, I would like to be watching the Oscars too, but I am here for you guys instead, to serve you and answer your Studio One questions. So we got Paul Morgan here as well, and we got Boris. And who else do we have? We got Kyle Dragisiak, we've got Rich Cresswell, we have Bobby Booth as well. And we got Don Oliver, and we got Lowens here as well. Lowens, it's been a long time, my friend. Welcome back. I'm glad you're here. Oh, right. Okay. Kyle basically says, if you've installed the L&R, aka Lander plugin, you need to reset your Windows audio settings. Yes, because the L&R plugin will basically take control of your Windows audio. That's what it does. Yeah, I've not tried it yet. It's just simply, to be honest, I haven't had time, but you guys are having fun with it, and it seems to be working for you guys, which is terrific. I will join in one of your sessions at some point, I promise. I just have not had time. When you guys have been on, I've not been able to jump in, unfortunately. And Dave has fixed his audio, so we're good. We are good. All right, so we've already got a question here from Boris, and whilst I'm dealing with this question, please do go ahead and drop the question into the chat if you have one. If you are watching here and you are not subscribed, you won't be able to do that. So if you would like to ask a question, or at least say hello and kind of where in the world you are, then please do hit that subscribe button, give it a couple of minutes, and then the chat will be magically open for you, and you will be able to ask a question or make a comment or something. Now, you will see Boris has learned well from being here. And that is, he started his question with at Jonny Lipsham Studios, which is the best thing to do, because what that does for me when I'm looking at the screen, it shows my name in red, and that helps me to pick out questions from amongst the general chat that's going on here. So if you could start any questions you've got with @JonnyLipsham it would help a lot. And you got to make sure you spell it right, otherwise it won't come up. So it's Jonny for Johnny. There's no H in there, okay? So please do that, and it would help me quite a bit. Likes are always a good thing. They help me a lot because it makes sure that my channel gets recommended by the YouTube vagaries that is the algorithm that it runs on. So please do that. And yes, I said do. I would appreciate it a lot. So we don't have a whole lot of people here yet, but hopefully some more people will come in. We've got about 16, 17 or 18 or so. So let's go see what we have. Russell Harris is also here. Hey Russell, good to see you. Welcome back. As I said earlier, give Johnny the finger. Yes, please do. Yeah, the thumb, I think, is what you're looking for, not the finger, but thank you. So let's go to Boris's question. And he says, procedural/process/best practice question. Preamp on interface input or channel insert after recording. Tried both. Interested to know others' workflow. Well, it depends upon your audio interface. If your audio interface already has really, really good high-class preamps, mic preamps, then really, I would say you don't need any plugins. You don't need any preamp type plugins at all. Unless, and this is a big unless you are after a specific tone. Like, for example, you are after the sound of an SSL console or a Neve console or something like that, then sure, use a console emulation as an insert on the start of it, in the first slot of every channel. Because by doing that, the audio is going to come into the channel, and the first thing it's going to hit is that console emulation, and you're going to get the sound of that console before it hits like other plugins. So if that's the sound you want, do that. However, most audio interfaces these days in 2025 have outstanding pre's. Really, really good. There are some exceptional ones, like RME. RME, I think the Babyface, has absolutely amazing pre's. The newer Apollo Universal Audio devices also have really, really great sounding mic pre's. The PreSonus Quantum, the new Quantum devices, they also have fantastic mic pre's. In fact, the HD8 and the HD2 have won awards, so they are worth investing some money in. They're not cheap, but you definitely get really good value for money for what you do get. Not only do you get a whole year's worth of membership of Studio One Pro Plus, which is a bonus, but at the end of that year, you also get a perpetual license to Studio One Pro 7 as well, and you get a fantastic interface with fantastic mic pre's, and the Quantum HDs also have the reamp circuits and inputs designed and built by Fender in collaboration with PreSonus. So that's really kind of since PreSonus was bought by Fender, this is really the first kind of major collaborative point in terms of hardware that we've seen. And basically, if you're wondering what the circuitry and the input stages are, they are the exact same ones as are on the Fender Toolmaster Pro. So basically, you're getting the input circuits for your guitar and your bass that is the exact same as the Toolmaster Pro. So it's like you're getting a miniature Toolmaster Pro built into the Quantum HDs. So that's kind of like an extra bonus. And so, you know, when you're looking at the price tag and you're thinking, $1,000, maybe a little bit too expensive. Think about all of those things that you're getting. You're getting exceptionally high class new mic pre's that are better than the ones that are on the Studio Series interfaces. The Studio Series have the X-Max pre's, which again are award-winning pre's, but they've been around for quite a while. Whereas these are brand new X-Max. They are better than the X-Max. It's kind of like the next generation of X-Max pre's, and they are amazing. With Burr Brown converters and a few other bells and whistles in there as well. But yes, there are a bunch of really, really high-class audio interfaces that have great inputs and great mic pre's. And really, that's what you need. You don't really need anything on the inputs of the console inside the door after the interface. Really, you really don't. Unless you are going for a specific sound like a console emulation, in which case, yes, do that. I know people that do, and I know people that have done that for a long time. They've basically set up Studio One, whereby it's effectively an analog console inside the digital audio workstation that is Studio One. And they've done that for a long time. And one of my friends in particular, he now has gone wholesale into the analog domain. So he has an SSL console. He has a whole bunch of outboard EQs, compressors, reverbs, delays, and stuff like that. So he's gone like completely down that particular road now. So yeah, it kind of depends upon what you want to do, what the sound is you are trying to achieve. Just bear in mind that if you are after a particular sound, that's going to be kind of printed into your mix. So how you mix will be dictated by the sound of those console emulations. So yes, we have the Mix Effects, the Retro Legends Mix Effects series. There's like only 4 of them now. Hopefully that'll be expanded and there'll be more added in the future, but we have 4 and they are really, really good. Those are really interesting, the Mix Effects plugins, because they actually replace the standard default audio engine of Studio One. So if you get the one that looks the most like the SSL console, I think they call it the brick console, that's the one that is most like the SSL. In fact, it's like, I think it's got like 3 different SSLs that have been modeled. And it is modeled. They have actually modeled to the schematic level and of the circuitry of each of these consoles to create these Retro Mix Legends plugins. Those actually replace the default audio engine. So when you have one on one of your buses or on the main out, those channels are actually going to a completely different audio engine. So that's something else to bear in mind as well. So Boris, it really kind of depends upon what you're wanting to do, and everyone in that respect is going to have a different workflow, a different idea of what they want to accomplish. For me, I work entirely 100% in the box. I didn't used to. I've been in professional audio now for over 35 years. And in that time, yes, I did start when I was a teenager. And so in all of those years, I grew up in studios that had either a Neve console or an SSL console. And the one that I actually sat with an audio engineer and learned how to mix, that was the SSL 4000E console. That's the one I learned on. Because I was based in a particular studio, I was the house drummer in that studio, which meant I got basically first dibs to play on most records that were being cut at that studio. In the 90s, in the late 80s, early 90s, and on into the beginning of the 21st century. I was house drummer at this particular studio, and I learned from one of the senior audio engineers at that studio how to mix, and I learned on this SSL console. Flash forward a few years, to about 2003, 2004. And I was not working at that studio anymore. I was kind of working at several different studios, and I wanted to have my own rig at home. And obviously, I couldn't afford £150,000, $300,000 for an SSL console. Didn't have the room for it either. So that's when I started going completely 100% in the box for everything that I did. And I actually got used to the sound of digital. Digital audio, not analog. Took me a while, but I got used to the sound. And, I think I actually prefer it. Weirdly enough, I think I prefer it. Which is why I have never gone back to using using any console emulation plugins until we came out with the Mix Effects Legends. And I found that we had this Brit console thing. And I started using that Brit console thing, and I was just like, oh, this really does sound like the old 4000 series that I learned on. It was like a flashback. It took me right back to when I was a teenager learning how to mix. And it was great. Still is great. And so that's the one, if I'm going to go for that kind of console sound, that's the one I use, because that's the one I learned on. Not to say I don't like Tridents or Neves or anything like that. They're all great. So if there are, console emulations out there, there's a bunch that are really, 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 really good. The Plugin Alliance ones, I think, are probably among the best. And Waves have done console emulations, and they've done other analog gear emulations of things like LA2As and 1176s and that kind of thing. They've done those for years and years and years. But they're not as good. To put it mildly, I don't think they are as good. I think what is available now from Universal Audio and also from what's the company I just said? Plugin Alliance. I think those are probably the two companies that are leading the way in console emulation and outboard gear emulation. For sure. So, obviously this channel is not endorsed by either of those two companies, but I will say those are probably your best choice if you want that console sound. For sure. Let's see. Boris says he's on a Quantum 2632. Quantum 6. Well, yes, that's the Quantum 2626, but it kind of does have 32. Yeah. The Quantum. Those Thunderbolt Quantum pre's are the same. They are the Xmax pre's fundamentally. So you're going to get the same sound if you're of the mic pre's. You're going to get the same sound whether you're using one of those older Quantum devices or whether you're using a studio interface like the 1824C or the 1810C, for example. They all use the same Xmax pre's. Now, the older Quantums use an older version of the Xmax pre's compared to the ones that are in the newer studio ones. So if you're using the first Quantum, for example, the very first one that we made, they have different pre's than the ones that are in the Studio Series interfaces, but they're still very, very good. For sure. Dave says, I think if using live inputs, the pre-fader inserts can help with achieving analog board sound. Well, pre-fader inserts, yeah. It depends upon what is in the pre-fader insert. You've got to have something that's going to emulate the console first in order to be able to do that, in order to be able to get the analog board sound. Just using pre-fader inserts isn't really going to cut it. You need to have the right kind of plugins to do that with first. But yes, I hear what you're saying. Dwayne says the new HD8 also has instrument input for guitar from Fender. Yes, it does. On the front of the device, I have it right here, sat in front of me. You have inputs for guitars. You have two inputs, but you also have two outputs. The two outputs are for reamping. So if you want to reamp a dry guitar into an amp and then back into the interface, you can do that. You can do that. There are a few videos out there in YouTube land that actually do reviews of the Quantums, and they show you how the reamp circuits work. Really, really good. First interface to actually have reamping circuits are the Quantum HDs. The HD2 and the HD8 have the reamps. And yes, they are the same input circuits as the Tonemaster Pro by Fender. And speaking of which, I have one. I've got a Tonemaster Pro just down there. And I'm still hoping that there will be an update to the bass amps in the Tonemaster Pro, because at the moment there's only one. And it's okay. It's pretty good. I kind of like it. But I would like there to be, you know, a couple more to choose from. Maybe, you know, an analog amp or an Ampeg, or maybe an SVT. One of those would be quite nice. You know, emulating those kind of amps would be awesome for the you know, and actually even the Fender Rumble would be nice as well, like the Fender Rumble 250. That would be awesome if they had that in there as well. Hopefully in the future they will get added. That'd be nice. Reamp out to the amp, set the amp tone, mic the amp, play the track, record the mic. Correct. That is how you do it. But you're probably thinking, I'm a bass player. Other than that, what use would I have for a Tonemaster Pro? Well, I like doing weird things. I like trying to find weird sounds for either my flugelhorn or my saxophone. And so I have been known to record my flugelhorn through the Tonemaster Pro and into Studio One, and get some amp and some distortion and some delay and some phase and some other weird stuff, and also using the octavizer that's on there as well. So, you know, I can play trumpet up high, but also have the octave below as well, which is great if I want to, you know, create like a trumpet trombone setup really quickly. I can do that. So yeah, Fender Tonemaster Pro with flugelhorn or with alto saxophone, you can do awesome things. In fact, you can create a whole horn section just that way, just using an octave pedal. Like if I want to turn my alto into a tenor or a baritone, I can do that. And there's a pitch shifter in Studio One as well, so I can do any of that stuff. So yeah, Tonemaster Pro is great for those kind of things if you are into those. Bobby Ruth says, what I've seen and heard, the most people use the SSL 4000E. Yeah, incredibly popular. Incredibly popular. Incredibly popular consoles way back in the day, in the, you know, the 70s, 80s, for sure. As were the Neves. The Neves were also incredibly popular. Still are. There's still an awful lot of studios out there with SSLs. Now, the problem is, the SSL 4000s, if you blow a channel, they're really hard to replace, and they are really expensive to replace. Which is why I have worked in studios where it's just like, they have a strip of tape across the channel, and it's just like, this channel is dead, do not use. And they just don't get them repaired. You know, so they'll just go, okay, we just got one fewer channel to use. It's okay. Just, you know, there are clear instructions on what you do to not blow a channel. But, you know, it does happen. But yeah, parts for those are really quite hard to find. Like the newer SSL consoles, in you know, like the 9000 series ones, parts for those are much easier to come by, and there are engineers. SSL will send out engineers where they will repair those channels. It's not cheap to get a channel replaced or repaired. Kyle says, I sometimes use the SSL 9000J, which has an E option for the EQ emulation. Yes, it does. The Brainworks one is the one I think you're referring to. That switch up for the EQ, so you have it sound like the 4000E or the 9000E, is amazing. It's great. Dave says, I use a saturation plugin these days, post fader or pre-master. Yeah, saturation is a good thing to do. Particularly if you have, let's say, for example, you have vocals and you want the vocals to cut through the mix a little bit more. Well, certainly some saturation will definitely help with that. And also saturation acts like a compressor to some degree as well. So that's kind of another option to use if you want to kind of, close that dynamic range gap a little bit. A little bit of saturation can certainly do that. Russell Harris says, I use the Fat Channel a lot. It's really good. Fat Channel is freaking awesome. I was like, I could not have been happier when that was added to Studio One version 2. Because it hitherto had not been in Studio One. The Fat Channel was added in version 2. I think it was in 2.4 or 2.5. Basically, the Fat Channel originally was modeled after the Fat Channel that was on the Studio Live mixers, the Series 2 mixers. Because they basically, what PreSonus wanted to do at the time was make better integration between the Studio Live consoles and Studio One. So they figured, well, if we have a Fat Channel built into the consoles that has EQ and compression, then we should have the same inside of Studio One, so that if you are working with a song that you've mixed on the console, you can then transfer all of that data into Studio One, work on the song in Studio One with a Fat Channel plugin that has all the same settings as you have on the console. And so that's kind of where the whole Fat Channel idea came from. And now, of course, it's taken on its own dimension. It is its own thing. And of course, what we do on the Studio Live mixes then happens in Studio One. So when the Studio Live consoles got the emulations of the EQs, the vintage EQs and compressors, and the vintage delays and reverbs, those also are now a thing inside of Studio One. So you have that nice one-to-one with Studio One and the mixer. Very, very cool. And of course, DAW mode was then obviously the next logical step, so that you could work with the console and Studio One and be able to interact directly. But yeah, the Fat Channel is freaking awesome, and those emulations are pretty darn good. Albeit, the thing you have to remember about the Fat Channel in Studio One, and this comes up a few times, but the thing you have to remember is the Fat Channel plugin was originally designed not for Studio One, but for the Studio Live mixers. So, a lot of the features that you might expect to find, such as like harmonic overtones and that kind of thing, from the EQs and the compressors that are in the Fat Channel, they're not kind of all there. The reason for that is because that takes a massive amount of memory to do that on the Studio Live mixers. So in order to make the amount of memory much smaller and more compact for the Studio Live mixers, they had to make some sacrifices, and that was one of the things that got sacrificed. So in order for the Fat Channel on the Studio Live mixer and the Fat Channel inside of Studio One to have that exact copy, that exact one-to-one relationship, there's not a whole lot of harmonic overtones in the plugins inside of Studio One. For that reason, we get this every now and then. Somebody says, "Hey, why are there no harmonic overtones?" I mean, there are, but there's just not a lot. There's not a massive range of harmonic overtones. The reason being memory on the Studio Live mixers. And the plugin needs to have exactly what the Studio Live mixers have. You can't have the plugin having more than what's on the mixers or less than what's on the mixers. Otherwise, if you're working on the mixer and then you transfer it to Studio One, you're not going to get the same sound. It's going to sound different, and therefore you're going to have to rebalance your mix inside of Studio One. And so, you know, that's not an ideal workflow for Studio Live mixer users. So that's the reason why the FAT channel kind of appears to be a little bit stripped down from what you might expect. That's why. So for those of you that have ever wondered that, now you know. Let's see. They say you can use amping to use foot pedals, but again, no videos. Yes, you can. Yeah, you absolutely can. Like if you want to add some wah-wah, for example, after the fact, or a talk box for a guitar track that's already recorded, absolutely you can. You just run out from the interface using the reamp circuit into your pedal board, and then the output from your pedal board back in. So that would work. I don't see why that wouldn't work. You know, so it's pretty much the exact same. Treat the reamp out just like a guitar cable to pedal, pedal out to instrument in, play track, record instrument in. Exactly right. Cal says, does the reamp out and instrument input work with pipeline? Like to use a pedal as an insert? No, I don't believe so. See, the other thing you got to bear in mind here, if you have your guitar plugged into the input 1 on the front of the guitar, on the front of the HD2 or the HD8, that uses the circuit for channel 1, for input 1, okay, which is on the back. So you can't plug into guitar input 1 on the front and also use channel 1 at the same time, because they're the same circuit. So that doesn't work. So if you're using input 1 on the front of the Quantum, that takes up input 1 on the back. So you have to use input 2 or one of the other inputs. So that's something else to bear in mind. But yeah, I don't think you can use a pedal via pipeline. But that's a really good question, though. Dave says, is there a way to match 2 live tracks in different tempos to align? Yeah. All you need to do is detect the tempo. Detect the tempo of your 2 tracks, and then use time stretch and use you know, the markers. Not the marker track, but the bend markers as well. And then you might have to do a little bit of manual jiggery pokery to get it to completely line up. But detecting the tempo and then using time stretch, that should line the 2 tempos up together. But if they are vastly out from each other, you're going to get some audio artifacting. That's for sure. If it's MIDI, Bernard, you're anti. It's not a problem because MIDI is just note data. So there's no artifacting at all, and it will just follow whatever tempo you set at any time. So, yeah, good questions there, folks. Really good questions. Let's see. I'm trying to see if there's anything else coming in that I may have missed. I don't think I have. I think I've covered everything so far. I'm just going to scroll quickly up. Nope, I'm not seeing anything out. I'm not seeing anything else new. But those are great questions, everybody. We're about halfway through the show, which is great. And thank you very much to everybody who has asked questions so far. These are really good. We did have about 23 people in here now, and we're kind of hanging around about 20, which is not bad considering I didn't advertise the show until like 10 minutes before because I forgot. Thank you to Billy Morgan, who did advertise my show. More or less round about the time that I actually created the live stream. So thank you very much, Billy, for doing that. You do that pretty much every week, and I kind of take for granted that you do. So I apologize for that, and I thank you very much that you do that. And yes, I said do again. That's twice in this show I've said do. Yeah, thank you, Billy. I appreciate it a lot that you advertise my show wherever you can, wherever there is a Studio One group that you're a member of. So I appreciate that a lot. We got 22 people here and we got 20 likes. This is really good. This is almost parity. That's amazing. Thank you, everybody. If you are watching and you are not yet subscribed, please hit that subscribe button, because then you will be able to ask a question. And that would be very cool. And you'll be able to tell us who you are and kind of where in the world you are. That would be great. So if you are up for doing that, then please do. I would appreciate it a lot. That's what this show is all about. Sunday Night Live, for those of you that are new, and I don't think we have anybody that I can see in the chat that's new. And Harley Bob's here. I forgot to mention Harley Bob's here. Harley Bob, I apologize. You've been here the whole time and I missed you. Sorry, dude. Yeah, if you are watching and you are new, and you're not subscribed, but you would like to ask a question, then yeah, hit that subscribe button and that will get you into the chat. But yeah, if you are new and you are watching for the first time, thank you very much. I appreciate it a lot. Carl says, who are you? Who? Yes, that very, very famous Who song. I think it's Who. Or it might be Pete Townsend. Might be one of his own songs. I can't remember. But anyway, made famous as being the title song for CSI, the original Crime Scene Investigation series. Which, by the way, I have been binge watching of late, even though the shows are like 20 years old. And some of the technology that they're using has dated quite a bit. But I'm still watching them. It is The Who. Thank you. Yes, I started watching that show again, even though I watched it all of those years ago when it first came out. I've been watching those all again, and actually they are as good as I remember them being. So, and then when I get to the end of the show, it's just like, wow, that show is 20 years old. My gosh. But yeah, it was a great series. And then, of course, you got the New York one, and then the worst of the series, the worst of the spin-offs, I think, this is just my opinion, is the one that had Caruso in it, David Caruso. I thought that was the weakest of the three shows, which was a shame. Mostly because I think David Caruso is one of those actors where you either like him as an actor or you think he's the world's worst actor. Because he is a bit one-dimensional. And he's a bit wooden, shall we say. And I don't think... I've seen him in a CSI Miami, yes. I've seen him in a few different things. And he just plays the same character, even if it's a different show. He still has he still likes to do the slightly sinister voice. I don't know why he does that, but anyway, that's a whole other subject. I've been watching that show all over again, and of course I like CSI New York because it has a great cast, and Gary Sinise leads that cast, or led that cast. It was a very, very good show, and it was a shame it came to an end. The Who have a knack for catchy songs. They most certainly do. I've listened to quite a few Who songs, and I think I can only maybe count half a dozen songs that I just went, that's a bit meh. But pretty much a lot of the songs are really, really interestingly written songs. I mean, this is really for a Songwriting Simplified show. But they are really interestingly written songs. The production is fascinating. Like they've always got something unique going on in the song. Like in Who Are You is a great example of, it's got some really interesting things going on. It's got like it's got a really interesting organ sound. I think it's a Vox Farsa for organ. And it just sounds a little bit weird, and it's really interesting, and it's a great song. I like it. And Keith Moon was he was actually a very, very good drummer. A lot of people thought he was a bit of a tub thumper, but he actually had some chops. He wasn't just that kind of a drummer. He was he was a bit. He actually had some decent chops. It's just a shame that it's just a shame he had some obvious mental health issues that kind of cut his life and his career short, because I always thought he was a really good drummer, actually. Much better than a lot of people thought he was. And he certainly appeared to have a sense of humor as well. Let's see. Anyway, we are kind of off topic here, mostly because I'm just kind of sitting here kind of like going, come on, guys, get some questions in there, please. But yes, we can talk The Who and their songwriting and arranging techniques on a Songwriting Simplified show for sure, because there's a lot of stuff going on in their songs. There really is a lot of stuff that's kind of unique and different, and they had sounds that I don't think people had really explored that much before. So yes, The Who, fantastic. But yes, if you still have Studio One questions, please do drop. Did I say chop? I meant drop. Please do drop them in the chat. That would be very cool. So I'm actually wondering how many of you have actually had a little play with the Cinematic Lights instrument since we released that just recently. Because I like it. I think of the three instruments of Deep Flight 1, Lead Architect, and Cinematic Lights, I actually think that Cinematic Lights is the best of the three instruments. So I think they're really good, but I think Cinematic Lights is probably the better of all of them. That's my personal opinion, but I would be interested to find out what you guys think. In the meantime, Keith says, what tricks to use to get soft vocals very up close in sound? Okay, there's two things that I can give you immediately that will give you that kind of the right up close and whispering in your ear sound. And actually, the first of these tips is actually the opposite of what I would ever suggest when recording a vocal. And that is, get up close and personal with the microphone. If you're going to be soft and you want that intimate sound, get close up to the microphone. Like, with my mic, my pop shield is maybe about that far away from the mic. Some people like it much further, like this far. I have it about that far away from the actual microphone itself. So what I like to do is get my lips almost touching the pop shield. And then I'm nice and up close. Now, you're going to get two things. The first thing you're going to get is you're going to get the proximity effect, which is going to give you a ton of low end. You might not want that. But on the other hand, if you are close up to the mic, you're going to get a really intimate sound. That's the first thing. The second thing is make it dry. That means no reverb, no delay, none. No ambient effects at all. Make it as dry as possible. And then, have that as a contrast to the rest of the vocal, where the rest of the vocal is nice, wide, and open, and has, reverb, has delay on it, and those kind of things. So when you're going to be loud, you're going to be further away from the microphone, like this. But then when you want to be nice and intimate, you want to be nice and close to the microphone, like this. It's the same volume as when I'm back here like this. I'm looking at the meter and it's the same volume, but it's much more intimate when we're close up to the microphone. So you can do that. And like I said, you'll get more low end when you are closer to the microphone than when you are further back away from the microphone. So that's how you get that kind of close, intimate sound, is dry, no effects. Now, by effects, I mean ambient effects. I don't mean EQ and compression. You're going to need EQ. You're going to need compression. You're probably even going to need a limiter, maybe, as well, because you want to squash the dynamic range as well, so that that whisper or that quiet vocal sounds really, really close. And then you could also use some parallel compression techniques as well. So maybe for like the whole of your song, you have a parallel compression bus that is squashing the living daylights out of the vocal, but it's not being used for most of the song, but it's only being used for this particular section. You could certainly do that. And as Kyle correctly points out, cardioid mics all have proximity effect. Correct. Dynamic mics with a different pickup pattern may not have that. Because dynamic mics, you can be really up close and you can be really up close to the microphone, and it's not gonna sound horrendous. Dave says, yeah, so to detect time tracking, it is based on transients, and I do like cinematic as well. Yeah, time stretching is based, yes, it is kind of based on the transients, because transients are easier to detect. Like drums, very, very easy to get in time. Guitar depends upon how much transient there is. If it's strumming with a lot of downstrokes, then yes, you can get a lot of transients, and those are going to be much easier to detect. However, if it's something like a cello or a voice, going to be much harder to get the tempo right using the tempo detection, because not so much in the way of transient with something that is bowed or something, the spoken word, which has a very, when you speak, doesn't have much transient unless you are using t and b and p. There you'll have transients, and particularly with t, you'll have transients. But not so much with other sounds, other mouth sounds. You'll not have really much of a transient. And the same with a violin or a cello, unless the string is struck with a lot of force with the bow. Then you'll get a nice transient that's easy to detect. But if it's just a legato played violin, good luck is all I'll say, because you won't have much in the way of transient information, and it's going to be hard to line things up, and you're probably going to have to do that visually. Look at where the start of the audio is for your violin or your cello. And then you're going to have to try and manually move that to the grid. And then you're going to have to try and find, okay, what is the loudest part of this sound? Do I want the loudest part of the sound to be on the grid and kind of like the onset of the sound to be ahead of it? Or do I want the onset of the sound to start on the grid and then the peak of the sound to happen after the grid? So those are decisions you got to make. Studio One, when it does its transient detection, it uses the peak rather than the onset. Other DAWs do it differently. Like Cubase uses the onset, I think, and certainly Pro Tools uses the onset. Whereas Studio One, the transient detection is done to the peak. Dave Barcelo is here. He says, better late than never. Yes, we are about to finish. We will be finishing in about 8 minutes. So, Dave, if you've got a question, get it in quickly. Dwayne says, I'm trying to clean up live band vocal track using the new vocal extract function. Results are fair to poor for now. I believe I can optimize it with technique. If you're talking about the stem separation, yeah, stem separation that we have just now, like any new feature added to Studio One, it's version 1.0. Okay? So it's always going to be version 1.0 of a new feature that will get better over time. So it's not going to be, absolutely, completely 1000% perfect out of the box. It's going to take some time getting to that point as algorithms develop and algorithms improve. I'm pretty sure that over time, stem separation will get better and better and better and better. So, for sure. I don't hear directional microphones discussed. Yeah, directional microphones, like dynamic microphones. Dynamic microphones are probably the most directional microphones. Or, you can get small capsule condenser microphones that are pretty directional, but they're still condenser microphones. I think Earthworks make a pair of microphones that are like overhead microphones, but they are what you would call small capsule condenser microphones. They are actually really, really very good. But things like SM57s, SM58s are dynamic microphones, and they are directional in as much as they only pick up really what's directly in front of the thing, which is why SM57s are perfect for recording guitar amps, because they pick up literally what's coming out of the amp and they don't really pick up much of the room. However, that said, if you back it off, away from the source, you're going to get more room introduced. But, an SM57 or an SM58 also makes a decent saxophone microphone or trumpet microphone. Again, for the same reason, if you are wanting to get room rejection, sorry, I've got a really itchy nose. If you're wanting to get, a lot of room rejection because you don't want the room because the room maybe doesn't sound very good, then yes, something like an SM57 can be pretty good. The thing you got to bear in mind with an SM57 on a trumpet or a saxophone is the air is going to be hitting the microphone directly. So maybe you want to set that microphone a little bit off axis so that the air is not hitting the microphone quite so directly. Which is why, for example, with a flute player, you don't necessarily point the microphone at the flute player's face because they're going to be blowing straight into the mic. You might point it like from above, pointing downward towards the flute, so the air is going across this way, and you're still going to get the sound because it's still going to be within the pickup pattern of the microphone, but you're not going to get the blowing directly into the microphone. Dave says, like to singers on the same mic would be side pickup. Yeah. For example, on that front, the Beach Boys, when they recorded things like Good Vibrations, they had stereo microphones and they would stand in a circle around the stereo microphones, and that's how they recorded those amazing vocals. They were all recorded together in one take with a pair of stereo microphones that had side address. But they might well have set them so that they are the pickup patterns are opposite to each other. In fact, there's a really good studio. It's in New York City, I believe. And they have fitted this studio out to be a retro 1950s studio. So you get like a lot of skiffle bands and kind of early blues bands. They like to go to the studio to record. And they have a whole bunch of Radio King microphones. And what they do is they record the band live in the live room. And what they do is they mic everything up, but they place everything so that, for example, you've got the drums being mic'd up this way. And so here's the drums. Here's the mic pointing to the drum set here, because that's kind of how they did it. One mic pointing at the drums, one mic overhead. And then to mic up the bass, they put the bass directly opposite the drummer, and his microphone is pointing at the bass, obviously, but it's rejecting anything that's behind it. So it's rejecting the drums. And then other instruments, you position them in such a way that they are always on the opposite side of microphones that need to be rejected. And that way, even though everybody's in the same room, you still get a pretty darn good amount of separation. So using microphones that have a different address or a different polar pattern so that you can get rejection is a good thing. Singers on the same mic would be side pickup. Well, this is a side address microphone, effectively. The microphone I'm using here. This is the Rode NT1A. And it's side address. So you are addressing the side. You're not addressing the top. Unlike an SM57 or an SM7B, which is top address. It's not side address. Yeah, I don't think it's that they are out of phase. I think it's just that the microphone doesn't hear them because the pickup for the microphone is facing the wrong way. So if I'm recording a guitar here and my bass player is here, I want a microphone pointing this way. So its polar pickup is picking up this way, but it's not picking up what's behind it. So I'm not sure that's to do with phase. I think that's more to do with where the pickup for the microphone is and which way it's phasing. But yes, I went to this studio. Oh man, the last time I was in New York, I went there, and that would be 2006 that I was there. And yeah, I don't know if one of the guys who started that studio, I don't know if he's still there, but he was basically my contact. And I met him through another friend of mine, and we exchanged emails back and forth, and I said, hey, I'm going to be in New York on X day, or rather X week. Could I come and hang in your studio for a couple of days? And he said, yeah, sure, it'd be great. So I went and I hung out and I saw how they recorded things. I saw how they set up to record things, and I saw, they have an ancient 1950s recording and mixing console and tape machine. And then they have one EQ and they have one compressor. And that is it. That is all they have. One EQ, one compressor, the console, and the tape machine. The tape machine is a 4-track tape machine. So that's how they record all of their artists. So, they've recorded big bands, they've recorded all sorts in their little live room. It's not quite so little, actually. It's actually really quite large. But yes, so they use all of these microphones and they just position them so that the pickup patterns for the microphones are opposite to each other, and therefore they can reject anything that's behind the microphone. It's very cool. Some of them do have adjustable polar patterns. Not all of them do. Some of them do. Some of the Telefunken microphones don't. They just have one pickup pattern, and it's just, you just have to place the microphone correctly. But yeah, some of the Radio King microphones, those ones do have adjustable, so they can be stereo, or rather they can be a figure of 8 configuration, or they can just be like a cardioid kind of pickup pattern. But yeah, lots of different microphones, lots of different choice. But yeah, they're using like antique tube microphones that, like, when they start the microphones up, it takes like, I think they said it takes like an hour and a half in the morning to warm up the tubes for the microphones. And then you got to be very careful how you manage them throughout the day. All right, we are at the end of the show. Thank you very much, everybody, for all of your questions and your contributions. It's been really, really great. Thanks a lot, everybody. And we will be back here for Songwriting Simplified on Wednesday. So if you've got questions on songwriting broadly, lyric writing, harmony, melody, arranging, orchestration, music theory, be here on Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central, and we will discuss those things then. I really love both my shows, and I enjoy them very much, and I enjoy your questions a lot. So thank you very much, everybody. There is a Studio One meetup pretty much right after this. So there will be a link in the chat as I play the closing music. And if you want to get over there to that and continue the Studio One discussions over there, you would be very welcome to, especially if you are a Studio One person. All right, folks, I will see you all on Wednesday. Good night, everybody. Bye.